All right, here we go. Uh, Andrew and John here as always with another episode of Sasquatchers. Bigfoot week at Sasquatchers continues, and we have a awesome guest that I am thrilled to have on. We've been chatting a little bit over the last couple of months, and I'm looking forward to having more in-depth conversation here on the show with everybody else. And I will introduce him to you all after the introduction.
The truth is out there. Never stop looking. Never be sheep. Always disrupt. We are the ungovernable. We are the truth seekers. We are Sasquatchers.
And so here we are again with another episode. And tonight we are being joined by Darrell Denton. And I will let him introduce himself a little further. And after that, we'll just get into what I hope is some really awesome and fun Bigfoot and cryptid discussion.
All right. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Honored to be here. I'm Darrell Denton, known from a lot of people around my area. They pretty much know me. I have the group Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures, and if you're not a member there, jump on and join with us. We'd love to have you there. I know my hosts here are members there, and I appreciate them being there. So I've had a lot of encounters over the years, and I'll open up the floor to how they want me to handle talking about that. Go ahead.
Why don't we just, let's start at the beginning. I remember a story that you told on another show. It's one of our pals' shows. I believe it was The Lost Frequency when you were on with Ryan Tom. And something that I thought was pretty interesting and compelling and kind of, allowed me to see that the scope of this world is a lot bigger than even I knew, was you were talking about an encounter you had when you were younger. And I couldn't remember if it was your father or your grandfather who was explaining to you that it was like a wood booger. And that was a term that I, until that moment, had never heard before. And that was kind of like a jarring thing for me to realize, that there's, as much as I think I know, there's so much more out there that I just don't.
Yeah, Ryan and Tom, a shout out to them. I really enjoyed being on their show. I was actually on there twice, and I hate to hear that they've disbanded that. I understand that one of them's going to start a podcast, or maybe both on their own. But the story you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, they're going to rock a show.
They're great guys. I think the world of them. But have a lot of fun on their show. I always got tickled. I was on as a guest in Mexico, and I would almost start laughing. You would hear these taco trucks going by and horns blowing, and it's kind of funny. And they get to laughing also. But my first encounter was in 1992. I deer hunted a lot. I was a hunter all my life, and I was on my grandfather's farm in Cannon County, Tennessee. It's very, very, very rural out there. I mean, there's the closest house to him was probably a mile away. There was a lot of farms that bordered his farms, and he had a large farm, and I hunted on that farm since I was a small boy, and I deer hunted, any kind of game there. Never seen anything there, but that particular case was November 6th of 92. It was opening day of black powder season, and me and three of my buddies, Scott, Jason, and Cody, we went up there every year, probably for at that time, it was probably about our 6th year there. We'd stay the whole week of black powder season, opening to close. And we took my camper up there. We parked a nice camper I pulled behind my truck, and we parked it next to my grandfather's barn and plug up electricity there. And we all had four-wheelers or ATVs, and they would follow me in a truck with a trailer with all four of them on it. And we would just set up camp and have a big time all week. We had spots there. We had stands built in the woods for hunting, all in different areas. And plus we had climbing stands too. That particular trip, we got there the day before opening day. We always did, so we could get it set up for the next morning. And my grandfather at that time, he was 92 years old and very close to my granddad. I lived with him from the time I was actually born in that county, and I lived with my granddad and grandma while my mom worked in Nashville, which was about 90 something miles from there. She would stay in Nashville with my dad all week, and they would come home on Friday night and be home till Sunday, and they'd leave Monday morning. So I stayed with them just about all the time. Even when I was older in the summer, I helped my granddad on the farm. And I asked my granddad, I said, "Where's the place to get a trophy deer?" I said, "I'm not just looking for a regular deer. I want one with a big rack." That was my goal that year. And I was on his back porch, and he pointed over into the wood line, and he said, "You see that third ridge over there?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I would go over there. That's your best place probably to see a large buck." And I said, "Okay." I said, "About how far is that?" He said, "Probably a good hour walk, and it's a lot of steep hills you got to cross." And so I hit it out. I had my climbing stand on my back, which was like a backpack, straps on it. You carry it and you go into the woods, where you go behind his house and you go through a gate that goes into a field about 200 yards wide, sage grass that time of year. And that particular field was about 200 yards wide and probably about 400 yards long. And it had a barbed wire fence all the way around it, regular fence with barbed wire string on top. And I would cross that, and I'd get to the wood line, and you climb that fence and go up this real steep ridge. And when I say steep, these hills in Tennessee are like 45-degree angle steep. I mean, they're steep. And I would climb over the top of that one. I had to climb over two hills and up another one. And when I got to the bottom of the third one, he said, "You'll see a large creek there. And you've been there before, but you've been by gravel road. That's my old home place where I was born, and you'll see what's left of an old grist mill to the left, some big rocks there, boulders, and you'll see the old home place. It's fallen in now. It was an old log house. All I could see of it when I got over there was part of a tin roof and a chimney standing. It was pretty good ways off to my left. There was a clearing across that creek right in the middle of the woods, and that's where the old home place was. It was probably 60, 70-yard clearing, with the old home place being far to the left and the edge of that. And I got over there, and I walked around the edge of the bank there in front of the creek, and I found a tree that I thought looked good. And of course, on a 45-degree angle, the tree's sticking straight up, so you're kind of always get up about 25 feet up high. That way I can see better for a good distance. And I got my stand, put it around the tree, and I climbed up the tree and just kind of got ready for the next day. I cut off a few limbs on the tree behind me where I could hang some things up there, like my binoculars and fanny pack, which I carried my powder horn and extra bullets and firing caps in, and came back down and got out of the stand and started walking around. I crossed the creek, and I had what was called a drag rag on my boot, and that's a strap. It's like an elastic strap with a piece of cloth about a foot long and a foot wide, and you put scent on it, what's called doe and estrus scent. When you walk in the woods, it covers up your scent as you walk, and a lot of times it'll cause a buck deer to follow that in because he's smelling that scent. And across the creek, and I went across the bank, and I started looking around, and I still had that rag on my boot, and I found where deer had been coming in there eating acorns, and there were some pretty good scrapes, which is what a buck deer does when it rubs its antler on a tree or a tree limb. And there was a big oak tree to the right across the creek there, and it had a limb sticking way out. And I jumped up and grabbed that limb. It was about 8 foot off the ground, and I'm 6'5", so I put my drag rag on the end of it and let it go up, and that kind of let a scent go out down that hollow, which kind of covered up my scent and hopefully would draw in a buck. And a male deer is the buck. And I headed back across the creek and over those hills and got back to the barbed wire fence, went back to my granddad and told him I was set up. And then I went out to the camper there where my buddies were, and they'd all been out to their spot and got ready for the next day too. And I told my granddad, I said, wake me up when you get up, and I'll head over to my hunting spot there. And we all had a good time that night, grilled out, and actually I remember watched football that night on our TV out there around the fire, and went in and went to sleep. And next morning my granddad come down and banged on the side of the camper and said, get up, boy. And my granddad always called me boy. He never called me by my name the whole time that we were together. He just always called me that. So I headed out, and pretty much the same thing as the day before. I went through the gate behind his house and went across that about 200-yard wide sage field and got to the fence line there and climbed the barbed wire fence. And I started going up that first hill, and it was real steep, and I had my flashlight, and I had my gun on my strap on my back, and it has a strap around it. I had it on my back and had my fanny pack and all my gear, and I was going up the side of that first hill, and I heard something over to the left and in the leaves, and there was a good distance from me, but it sounded like somebody walking like a human. And I stopped and listened and shined a flashlight in that area. I didn't see anything. And I was a little nerved, though, thinking, I can't imagine somebody being in here hunting, because my granddad would never allow them in here while we're here. And I knew it wasn't any of my friends, because I knew where they were hunting at. They were all in different areas to my right, probably half a mile from me. And I went on up top of the hill, crossed that hill, and got down to the next hill and kept looking back to see if I could hear that. And I didn't hear it. And there was a little small barbed wire fence there I crossed that had fallen down. It was an old one, and I got up to the top of the third hill, and I started going down to the bottom of the third hill, headed toward that creek where I'd walk around the edge to my tree. And I was a little ways down, and I heard it walking again. This time it was on top of the hill that I'd just come down, the third hill. It sounded like it was walking on top, and it would stop when I stopped. And I thought, well, maybe it's a cow or a horse that's got in here. But it didn't sound like that. It sounded bipedal, like a person walking. And I would stop, and it would stop. And I would walk a little bit and stop real quick, and I could still hear it. Well, it kind of startled me a little bit, so I got on down to the bottom of that hill, and I was real close to the creek. The creek was to my right, and the wood line was to my left. And excuse me. And I walked on around with my flashlight. I wasn't real familiar with that area, and I was trying to find my stand around the tree, and I found it and got my feet in the climbing part real quick and sat down in the stand and started climbing my way up the tree. You lean back and it locks into the tree, and you climb a little further and do that, and keep going to where you want to stop. And I got about 25 feet up and lean back real hard where the blade will stick into the tree real deep. And I put my safety strap around me and tied it up on the limb behind me, and hung my lunch up to the left and my binoculars my lunch to the right and my binoculars to the left on a little limb I'd cut off, and hung my fanny pack up there with my powder horn in it and my shells and my powder caps, and kind of laid back a little bit and pulled down, had a little bar in front of this particular stand, and it would come right right about your neck area, and it would fold down. It had a little camo-like cover inside of it. It would cover up your feet and everything. And I just sat there and I kept listening to the left, and I didn't hear anything else. I don't know where that sound went to, but I didn't hear it anymore. And I don't know exactly what time of the morning that was, but it was still dark. And it was really quiet in the woods. I didn't hear anything moving around. And, I sat there a good while, probably an hour. And right when the sun started to come up a little bit, it was a real foggy morning. I looked across the creek and it was real foggy. I couldn't see the other side of the clearing where I'd hung the drag rag. The fog was coming off the creek, and the creek right there is about 10 or 12 foot wide, but it's maybe a foot and a half, 2 foot deep, and it gets a lot wider on down, like real wide, and runs all year round. And I was watching the fog slowly break away, and I started hearing regular animals, squirrels and everything running in the leaves and birds, and I was ready for the hunt. And it was just started, the fog cleared up and the sun was coming out a little pretty good. It was bright enough that I could see the woods real well. And I looked across in the clearing and I was just kind of looking around to see if I seen anything moving. And it was probably about 7:45 when I, out of the corner of my left eye, caught a deer. It came, there was a huge cane thicket to the left of me on this creek bank. And canes are real tall. It looks like regular cane, except it's green, like a cane pole type. And this stuff is really tall. It's like 12, 15 foot tall. And it's real thick. A person couldn't hardly walk through this. It's that thick. And it went all the way down the creek bank from the left of me until I couldn't see if it broke or how far it did go, but it went a good ways. And one of those deer had come out from somewhere over in there, and it walked across the creek and went up the bank. And right on top of the other side of the bank there was a game trail that ran on top of the other side of that creek there, right next to it. And it ran all the way down past where I had that drag rag on. And just a few minutes later, 2 more deer came out, and they followed that one up, walked through the water, went up the bank, and just walked right down the game trail there, right straight across in front of me. I'm looking down kind of over them in the tree because it's on the side of that 45-degree angle. And they didn't see me. They just walked down the game trail, and they started milling around in the leaves like deer do, and they were eating acorns, just acting normal. There was a big doe, which is a female, and 2 younger ones, probably yearly ones of that year. They weren't real big, but they weren't small, and they walked around. I watched them for a good 15, 20 minutes, and they kind of turned to the left and walked back in front of me to my left side like they were going the other direction. And then all of a sudden, the front deer, I watched her ears, they popped up, and I was like, okay, here comes a buck. I first thought in my mind, it was staring right over in that cane thicket somewhere down that bank. I couldn't see around that cane thicket from where I was sitting. I could just see the biggest, tallest part to my left. And all of a sudden, she just froze, and all 3 of them were staring in that same direction, and she wasn't even moving. She was just like something had her attention over there, and I was kind of excited. I've got my 50 caliber muzzleloader, and it's laid against that bar in front of me. I reached down and pulled the trigger back. I remember it. And I'm thinking, well, here comes a buck's about to come out over there. And about that time, the front bigger deer, the doe, raised her nose and she blew real loud. And when they blow, it sounds like somebody's sneezing, except it's a lot louder. It's a real loud sound they make in the woods when they blow. And then she took her right front paw and raised it 2 or 3 times and hit the dirt or the leaves and right on the game trail there in front of her, like she was trying to get something to move over there, which is kind of unusual. I'm thinking, well, why would she be doing that if it's a buck, Well, she continues to stare that way for a second, and then all of a sudden, for no reason at all, she turned to the right and ran right back in front of me, across in front of me to the right. And the other two deer were running right behind her, and they were running as fast as they could. And I watched them run until they went out of sight. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, here comes a monster buck out over here somewhere. But I've never seen deer run from a buck like that. It was almost like somebody had shot at them. So I could kind of puzzle on why they did that. But at the same time, still thinking maybe it's a big male deer with a big buck coming out over here to the left. And I sat there a few minutes, and then all of a sudden I seen this tall cane moving, and it was swaying in the top. You could see something walking through it because it would sway in certain areas, and I watched it sway, and it was a large amount of it. And I'm thinking, well, this must be one massive deer to move that cane like that, because I watched that cane move until it got to the edge of the cane to where it ran out to the game to the little game trail there. And then I'm thinking, well, here it comes. And about that time, I'm looking right at it in that area, and this creature steps out. And I'm like, just can't believe what I'm seeing. I didn't know what it was. I'd never seen anything like that. And it made one step out of the cane. It took one leap and jumped completely onto the other side of the creek bank and landed on that game trail right next to that game trail and started walking down the game trail. And it wasn't walking fast. It wasn't walking slow, just a normal pace. It walked. I'm looking down over the clearing, and it walked right by me. It was walking to my right, and it walked right to straight ahead of me, and it stopped, and it turned and looked right at me. And by this time, I'm just practically froze. I'm thinking, what is that? I've never seen anything like that, and pretty scared. I didn't really know what this was. I never seen anything on that farm or anywhere like this. And then it looks at me, just keeps staring at me. Then it shows me its teeth, and it kind of grits its teeth and stares at me. And I'm just frozen. Can barely, I'm seriously, I could hardly breathe. I still feel it right now, that feeling I had that day. And I don't
Yeah, I can
scare.
imagine.
I don't scare easy. It takes a whole lot to scare me. I've been around about everything you can think of in the woods, and I never seen anything like that. And then it just walks over about 4 or 5 feet on the game trail. It reaches up and grabs that rag that I had in the tree, pulls it down right in front of its face and smells of it. And then it reaches and just pulls the whole tree limb, just rips the tree limb completely out of the tree. Now, this wasn't a real thick tree, limb. It was probably 3 or 4 inches at the base of where it went into the tree, but it took a pretty good amount of strength to rip that thing out of the tree like that, and just threw it on the ground. And then it walked right back in front of me. It growls, makes a growling sound looking at me. It looked at me so mean. This was the meanest looking thing I've ever seen. And its mouth, the right side of its mouth, was kind of contortioned. It's hard to explain. Instead of being straight, it kind of curved up. And it was just looking at me, and it made that growl sound, real deep growl, looking at me in its eyes. It was really mad that I was there. And by this time, I'm sitting there thinking, well, what do I do? Do I shoot this thing? Do I just jump and run? I didn't really know what to do. And I started thinking, well, I don't believe one bullet's going to bring this thing down. That's what I started thinking. If I shoot this thing and don't kill it, it's going to come over and pull me out of this tree. I thought it was going to anyway, but then all of a sudden it lets out the loudest, longest scream I've ever heard. And I've never heard a scream like that since, not on anything. Mr. Ron Moorhead's one of my closest friends, and nothing on the Sierra Sounds, not any Bigfoot scream I've ever heard like this one. And it was a real low, guttural, loud sound turning into a long, drawn out scream. And by the time that ended, I was completely frozen. I could barely move. I was trying to breathe. I thought, well, this is it. This thing's crossing the creek. It's going to pull me out of this tree. And I'm sitting there the whole time trying to figure out whether to shoot it or not. And I'm just sitting there froze. And then all of a sudden it turns and just walks straight ahead back behind. I'm looking this way and it walks straight ahead back toward the wood line behind where it was standing. And it turned and looked at me one time as it was walking, and I watched it walk off into the wood line and disappear. And I was in a complete state of confusion, and I just lowered the bar that I had with my rifle that the bar was leaning on. And I jumped out of the top of the stand. It was 25, 30 feet up. And when I landed, I landed in the leaves. There was leaves all over the ground that time of year. And being on that 45-degree angle, I slid all the way down into the creek standing up. I had my gun above my head. And I looked across the creek. I didn't see the creature. I turned to my right, run up that creek bank, and ran around the hillside where I'd come down at. And there was a little cut there that was a little shallower, wasn't quite as steep. I ran right up it. And I'm running as fast as I can the whole time, looking back constantly to make sure this thing wasn't coming. And I got to the top of that hill, and it was a long hill. When I got to the top of it, I was so out of breath that I just was basically gasping for air. And when I got over the top of that hill, I got down and I jumped that little small barbed wire fence that had just about fallen, and I was headed up the second hill, and I looked back, and there that thing was standing on top of the first hill. And when I seen that thing standing up there, it was like an extra burst of adrenaline hit me or something. I don't know if it was the same creature or another one, but it looked like the same creature. And I just took off as fast as I could go up that hill. And that hill was about as long as the one I just come down. I was completely out of breath from the time I got to the top. And I kept looking back. I didn't see it coming after me. Got over that hill, been going down, got all the way to the third hill, kept looking back, didn't see it. And I was coming down the third hill, and that barbed wire fence is at the end. That barbed wire fence was probably about 7 foot tall with the strands of barbed wire at the top. The fence itself was probably about 6 foot. It was an old wire square fence. It wasn't old, it was new. My granddad hadn't had it up long, but the barbed wire was new on top. There was 2 strands of barbed wire. And when I was running so fast down that third hill, I wasn't going to stop and climb it. I jumped it. And I jumped that fence, running as fast as I could, and I caught my left pants leg and ripped it all the way up past my knee, cut a huge gash on the left side of my leg. I just kept running. I was in that sage-grass field, which was about 200 yards between the fence line and my grandfather's backyard, and I kept looking back and running as fast as I could, looking back. I didn't see it. Got to the gate, opened the gate up, looked around, didn't see it, locked the gate back, and hid straight back up to my grandfather's back porch. And he had a door there on his back porch. There was an overhang there, an old tin roof farmhouse. And I went in the back door and slammed the door, opened the door back up, and put the little hook on the screen door that I had opened up to get to that door. And then I locked the door, pushed the door back, locked it, looked out the windows in the door, didn't see anything. Went into the right in the back. I came in the kitchen there. That's what went to the back porch, and went to the right and ran into the living area. My granddad was sitting to the left in his rocking chair. I ran over and just sat down in the corner of the floor. There was a big, huge potbelly stove there about halfway between the corner and the center of the room. And I sat down on the floor, and I was just doing everything I could to get my breath back. My granddad was just sitting there looking at me, and he said, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" And I couldn't talk. I was trying to get my breath, and I just kept trying to get my breath. My granddad said, "Boy, you okay?" And I just was trying to talk, couldn't talk. He said, "You look like you seen a ghost." That's what he said. You look like you seen a ghost. And finally, I got my breath, and I said, "Well, Granddad, I seen a monster." He said, "A monster? What are you talking about?" I said, "I don't know. I never seen anything like that. It was a big, huge, hairy, human-looking, mean-looking monster, and it was just staring at me, and it was mad." And he said, "Oh, you seen the Wood Booger?" And I said,
Just casual like that.
"What do you mean a Wood Booger? You never
That's the
told
Wood
me,
Booger.
you never told me anything about a Wood Booger." And he said, "Oh yeah, they around these parts." He said, "They've been around these parts all my life, and the old people told me about them, and I've seen 4 of them in my lifetime. They're real territorial. I should have known if I sent you over in there. Probably nobody's been in there in 20 or 30 years. And since you went there last with me," and he said, "you probably made him mad you was in his territory." He said, "They don't hurt you." He said, "They just don't like people in their area." And I said, "Well, not this one. He wanted to kill me." And he said, "Well, if he'd have wanted to kill you, he would have." And he said, "He just trying to scare you and run you out of there." And I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me about this Wood Booger thing?" He said, "Well, I didn't want you to know about them because when you were growing up, you always camped in the woods and by yourself or with your cousins or friends, and you hunted in them and spent the night in the barn in the hayloft. And I didn't want you to be scared of nothing out there." And he said, "They never bothered me. I've seen 4 in my lifetime. I'll be working in the field, and I'll look up and want to be standing right next to the fence just watching me work." And I said, "Why didn't you tell me about them?" I said, "I'd have never went in those woods if I'd have known about these things." He said, "That's why I didn't tell you." And he said, "In the wintertime," yeah, he said, "in the wintertime," he said, "I've heard a lot of them." He said, "They yell and scream, make all kinds of noises, but I've only seen 4 in my lifetime." And he said, "My grandfather had a big hen house out to the left of his back porch, probably about 50 feet from the porch, and it was made out of logs. It'd been there for years, and he had a lot of chickens in there." And he said, "In the wintertime, they get hungry, they can't find any food. They'll come up here to the hen house, and they'll get in the chicken house, and they'll get 2 or 3 chickens, and I don't take them all, just 2 or 3, and they get hungry, and they'll leave a little pile of rocks and sticks like they're paying for it."
Oh, currency.
I said, this, I don't understand. I remember telling him, I said, "I don't understand. I would have never went in those woods if I'd have not." He said, "That's exactly why I didn't tell you. They ain't going to hurt you. They just territorial." He kept saying they're territorial. So, that's pretty much, I went out, I sat there in shock for probably a couple of hours, still trying to, and I would get up and go look out the window, and I'd go look out the door to make sure this thing wouldn't come. And Granddad said, "Just calm down. You're going to be all right. Just go over there and calm down." And I sat there, nervous wreck, and still scared to death. And I guess it was 2 or 3 hours later, my buddies came in, from their hunting place, and I heard them come in down there. And I walked out to them, and one of them had a deer in the tree, a buck that Scott had killed, and they were skinning it out. And I walked down, and all my buddies that always called me Big D, and they said, "Big D, did you see anything?" And I said, "No, I didn't see anything." And they said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Well, let me ask you guys something. We've been hunting here for 5 or 6 years, maybe a little longer, but you ever seen anything in the woods strange?" And they said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Something that looks kind of like one of those Bigfoot." And they all started laughing. They said, "Big D, you had too much to drink last night." I said, "I didn't have anything to drink." And I didn't say anything else about it. I didn't say another word about it. They just looked at me kind of strange. And I hung around with them a little while, and I was still just shaking. I can't even explain. It's that was my first experience, and I've never forgot it. It was probably the scariest I've ever been in my life by far. And I went back, and they camped out the rest of the next 5 nights, and I stayed in the house with my granddad. And I'd go out and hang out with them till dark, and then I'd go in the house and I'd sleep in the house in the other bedroom with my granddad. I didn't hunt anymore. They hunted every day, and they didn't know I didn't hunt. They'd go out hunting. They thought I'd been out hunting too. I didn't even mention it. Didn't mention anything else about what I'd seen either. But that was end of my hunting. I didn't hunt again. Well, I hunted a few times, probably 4 or 5 years after that, but I was only in my truck. I'd take my truck and I'd pull in a field somewhere that I knew that I had permission to hunt. And I would just sit there hoping a deer would come out. Didn't have a lot of luck, but I wasn't going back in the woods. And I told my, I had nightmares. I had nightmares for months after that. Every night it just started in and went on for a long time. And, it drug out. It got better as time went on, but I got back home where I lived, which was about 75 miles from there where I lived at that time. And I started trying to figure out what this was, and I started going to the library trying to find pictures of these things. And excuse me. And I finally found a book that had a picture of it. Said 10 type of Bigfoot, exactly what it said. And it had 10 numbers on there, 1 through 10. And the second one, funny thing, was exactly what I seen, except for the eyes were red. The eyes were red in this picture, and the one I seen didn't have red eyes. They were just black eyes with, an outline of the outline of the white that looked more yellow than white. But it was called number 2, Wood Booger. And I said, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I seen in the Tennessee woods. And I'll never forget, on this book, it said these creatures are mainly up far west United States. Some have been seen in the northern United States. And a few are in the southern United States, especially the Wood Booger. That's exactly what it said. And I went, oh my God. That was
even the term Wood Booger is right there.
That's what was in there. It's exactly what it said. And they said the Wood Booger is known to be in the southern United States. So, and I was in the southern United States. So, exact picture of what I seen except for the eyes. But
so is that how you got into researching this stuff? Just kind of building off of that, or was there maybe more time and?
I never wanted to research them. I found out what they were, and and we still went up there hunting every year, muzzleloader. The next year I went back with them. I didn't hunt. They hunted. I told them, I said, I'm tired of hunting. I don't care about going anymore. I just didn't want to go back down there. So it was pretty crazy. It took a toll on my life for quite a few years there. But what got me into research, it's a long story. I know we don't have a lot of time here, but what got me into researching was I didn't want to ever see one of these creatures again. I hoped I never seen another one. And of course, I didn't know what else was out there. I do now. I know a whole lot. I've been very blessed for some reason. I have a lot of native ancestry in me. My grandmother was, on my dad's side, was full-blooded Lakota Sioux, and she taught me a lot about things. But she told me a lot of stuff that was out there. But I didn't take it serious. I thought it was, an Indian wise tale or something. But anyway, what got me to researching it was 1999, which was about 7 years after my first incident. I was at a spot that I fished on the Cumberland River between Nashville, Tennessee, and Cheatham Dam, Cheatham County, Tennessee. It's real remote in that area. The Cumberland River runs through there. That's the main water flow through Nashville and that area. It turns into Lake Barkley on the other side of Cheatham Dam. And I was fishing on a spot that I'd fished for years there. I didn't go there often. When I was younger, I fished there with a couple of buddies. Quick story, their uncle worked at this water treatment sewage plant. I'm not sure which one it was, but it was one of those. I don't remember. But it was a place that it was a place to fish behind it. And you had to have permission to go back there. Nobody ever fished there. The only people ever fished there was me and 2 or 3 of my friends because his uncle worked there, and we would pull down in behind this plant. It was a big, huge fence all the way around it, and he would park down there. They'd let us park down there and walk through this gate and go back along the riverside. There was a game trail. You went about 200 yards back through the woods, and there was a little clearing where a creek run out. And there was a sandbar that ran all the way out to about halfway to the middle of the river. And we would fish back there, and it was a real good fishing place. We caught a lot of fish there, good fish. And I was fishing there and ran into some more of these things. And I was just, it's a long story on that. And that was a completely different creature than what I'd seen the first time. It was nothing like the first one. And there was actually
what was different about it?
Well, it didn't look anything like the first one. Nothing at all. And long story short, I'd been back there 3 weeks in a row, and my minnow bucket would go missing every time I was back there. I couldn't find my minnow bucket or my minnows, and I couldn't figure out what was happening in my minnow bucket. I'd go down to put a fish on a stringer and come back, my minnow bucket was gone. So I thought somebody was in there, and I thought somebody was either living down there on the river or just coming in there and grabbing my bucket when I go down to the sandbar to reel in my fish and hang it on a stringer. I'd come back up, I had a 5-gallon bucket I'd set on next to a tree there, and my minnow bucket would be gone. That went on for 2 weeks in a row, and the third week is when I found out what it was. I tied a string to that bucket and tied it around the tree. That way, if something was getting it, I would have time to see what or who or what was getting it, and that's how I caught them. And it was a young one, stole my minnow bucket, looked out around the tree and looked at me, and that scared me to death. I said, oh no, here I have, I found these things again. But it was, it was by complete accident, but these were nothing like the first one. They became my friends after being a nervous wreck for a month or so there, figuring out where I wanted to go back in there again after I found out what it was. I carried my shotgun with me. I was scared that these things were going to attack me or something, but I could not help for not going back. I had to know. I've sat and thought about it for a week, and I said, I'm going back. I got to figure out what's going on with these things. So I went in there and I befriended those things, and there was a whole family in there. I could hear them, but I only seen 3 of them. And the 3 that I seen regularly for a little over 3 years. And I went in there every day for quite a while. For just about every day or every other day, I was there. And I would sit, and after I got comfortable with them and they got comfortable with me, and I realized they weren't aggressive like the first one and they weren't trying to harm me. They were as curious about me as I was about them, but they were super intelligent. These creatures aren't apes. These creatures are people. They're not an ape.
I'm curious, not to interrupt you, but you had mentioned that when your granddad was telling you about when they would take the chickens out of the coop and they would leave the stones and stuff almost as payment. That's a pretty popular thing in the field. So I was curious if maybe you happened upon any of that when you started to notice that your minnow buckets were disappearing.
No, never did. The first time my minnow bucket disappeared was, I'd fished there years ago with friends of mine in high school. And Dwayne and his brother Donnie. That's how I found out about the place. Their uncle, I think it was their uncle, worked there. And he had told him it was a good place to fish because he had gone down there sometime. But nobody else ever went down there. Nobody ever knew about this place but us three guys. And I started going down by myself. They told me they didn't care if I went, and he didn't either. He knew my car and my truck. He knew what I drove, and I'd leave a note on it who I was and a number. Of course, I didn't have a cell phone then. I didn't even have a cell phone, I don't think, till about 2000 and probably 2002 or 3 before I had one. And I did not have one then. But the first time I was down there fishing, I came back after I just caught a fish to put a minnow. I'd carry 4 or 5 dozen minnows with me in a styrofoam minnow bucket, and had a little thing where you could, like a little net, you could catch a minnow, take it, put it on your hook. And the first time my bucket was completely gone. I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't figure out what happened. Walked around the bank, and there was a game trail that you walk back in there on. And the game trail went down to the left as I was setting to my left. And it was real thick with this, what they call kudzu. It's like real thick ivy looking stuff that grows all down the riverbank. And it's so thick you can't see through it. Well, the game trail went through that. But it was real low right there. I'd never been down in there before. But you had to get down on your knees almost to crawl through it, and then it would open up a little further, as I'd found out later on down in there. But it was real thick all through there. You couldn't see what was in there. And the second week I went back to fish, I lost my minnow bucket again, but that particular day it had been raining and storming. I was thinking, well, maybe it blew off in the river and floated down the river. But of course, the styrofoam minnow bucket doesn't sink. You could see it, but it was too much of a coincidence to lose 2 minnow buckets in 2 weeks. So I knew something was going on. Somebody was getting my bucket. So I tied a string or small rope onto the metal handle of the third minnow bucket, and I tied it to the tree. I tied the end of it to the tree where I was sitting on I would carry my gear in a 5-gallon bucket, my tackle box and everything in a 5-gallon bucket, and hold the minnow bucket in that hand. And I'd carry my rod and reels in the other. And then I'd take the bucket and I'd sit on it against the tree as my seat. And the third time I was there, when I came back from catching a fish, my minnow bucket, when I walked up there, my minnow bucket was down that game trail into that kudzu. That rope was stretched tight from the tree into that area. And I said, okay, now I know. And I had my shotgun with me. I brought it, and it was just a 410 single shot. It was nothing super powerful, but I didn't think I was dealing with anything like this. But I thought it was probably a person. But, because you don't lose 2 minnow buckets for no reason at all. I thought somebody was getting them. So I walked up and got my gun, and I looked down that trail, and I leaned the gun against the tree, and I seen the minnow bucket down that. It was real low. You had to get on your knees almost to go down it. The bucket was stretched from that rope down to that game trail, and it was real muddy right there on that trail where deer and everything else had walked on it regularly. There was just like a muddy spot in the woods where all kinds of animals use that trail. And I got down real low, and I went in there to get my minnow bucket, and there to the left, right past my bucket, lay another minnow bucket with a lid off to the left. I looked down to the right a little ways, and there was my other minnow bucket. I said, well, there's both the buckets I lost. It's got to be them. And here's this bucket stretched out with this rope tight all the way down this muddy trail, and the lid was off that bucket, the one that was stretched from that day. The lid is tied on with a little rope, and you pull the lid off to use the dip net to get a minnow out. It was off, and all the water had been sliced out on the trail, and there was only 1 minnow in it. And I had like 4 or 5 dozen in there. I'd only used 2 or 3 minnows. I hadn't been there long, and I knew right then, something has got all the minnows out of here. There's only one. And I looked right down next to the lid, and where it was muddy there was a footprint. And I seen the footprint. I said, this is March. Who in the world is going to be in Tennessee in 38-degree weather barefooted? And I looked down and seen that footprint. It wasn't a massive print. I don't know how long it was, probably 10 inches long, maybe. But it's still very strange to see a footprint, in the middle of the winter almost and down the riverbank. So I basically went back and I got the bucket, picked it up and pulled it back and set it next to the tree. And I sat there on my bucket with my poles out like I was fishing with my shotgun on my right. I had my shotgun in my right hand holding on to it. And I sat there for an hour or so because I was going to catch whatever was getting my minibite. And I sat there I don't remember how long it was exactly. It might have been 2 hours, but I kept looking at the corner of my left eye, just trying to catch, waiting for whatever it was to come out. And then I seen it. It was not a big one, 5.5 foot tall. It was holding on to a tree and it was leaning out like this on that little game trail looking at me. Then it would go back in when I'd look. Then I'd look again, it would lean out and look at me. When I looked, it'd go back in. I said, oh no, it's one of these creatures again. That's the first thing I thought. I said, I can't believe I found these again. But it didn't look anything like the other ones. These look more like actually it's called type 3 or 4. More of the traditional Bigfoot look. It didn't have a cone head, but it looked more like the patty type Bigfoot. But it wasn't a big one. Turned out it was a female. She was about 5.5 foot tall. And later on, I met another one about that size that would be behind her, and he was a male. He was about her height or a little taller. And then the bigger one, that I met after quite a few more visits, he was watching over them, and he was about 7 foot tall. And they were just curious. They were very friendly, never aggressive. They wanted to know what I was doing there. And they looked at me and they were trying to figure me out. And I was trying to figure them out. So I got pretty, if it hadn't been for them, there's no doubt in my mind, if I hadn't run into those on the river, I would have never gotten over my first encounter because it really changed my life big time. These were so friendly, I didn't feel aggression toward them, and I actually became friends with these creatures. I spent the night there with them.
That's incredible.
I spent over 3 years there with that family of Bigfoot, and there was a whole bunch of them in there. I don't know how many was in there. I never seen them all. I could hear them. They would grunt and make all kinds of noises in there. They knew I was there, and the bigger one, the 7 foot one, roughly 7 foot, was looking over these 2 younger ones, and the younger female had friended me. She had become my friend. She would make me gifts. I would take them stuff and started taking them food. And I didn't know anything about gifting back then, but I was trying to think what I could do. I started off taking them some regular things like marbles and balls and different type toys, and then I started carrying them some different food, certain things they wouldn't even touch, and I made a little wooden box out of plywood and some 2x4s, and I put it in that tree I sat in, and there was a fork there, and I nailed it in between it where none of the ground animals could get it. And they would come and get whatever I put up there out, and what they liked they would take, and I learned what they liked to eat. I learned their favorite foods, and one day I was bringing them all kinds of, when I didn't bring them food, I'd bring them some other kind of something, a toy or something. I never brought both. I'd bring, a cantaloupe or an apple or whatever, several apples. I wouldn't bring one because there was more than one in there. But when I brought them the whistles is when I really learned a lot about them. So one day I brought them, I was in a dime store called Elmore's there where I lived, and in the birthday section had this little plastic bag of plastic whistles that kids get birthday parties, and they're little red and white whistles, have a little black string on them. And I think there was 8 or 10 in that little bag, and I said, I'll just take them these. So I bought them and went down there, and after I'd tried to communicate with these things for a long time, I would tell them my name, and I would speak to them in my native language. I would say Chayi Tanka. I would all kinds of stuff to try to get communication out of them, and they would look at me and they would make a few gestures or shake their head or point up or something, but I didn't get anything like I was trying to get out of them. I kept telling them my name, but when I left those whistles, I left and I said, "See you later. Bye. I'll see you tomorrow or the next day." And I'm walking off and I start hearing bye, bye. And I went, they were saying what I just said. I said, bye, see y'all later, bye. And they would start saying bye. I was thinking, these things can talk. And I left those whistles, and the next day I was down there, and they knew my voice when I was coming in. It's about 200 yards from there back to the fence where I went through to my car. And I would walk back in there, and when I'd start walking in, I'd start telling them, "Hey, I'm here. I'm coming to see you." And I would start walking, and that day was just like, I can still hear it now. I heard whistles everywhere. And I thought, these things are blowing them whistles. And they were blowing straight ahead, one way back somewhere back behind them, one across the river was blowing a whistle. All these whistles were blowing at the same time. And when I got in and got set down on my bucket, they quit blowing them. And here come the female out again. She would be probably maybe 30 feet from me, squatted down in between the kudzu and the trail, and had one hand on the tree, and she just look at me, and I'd go, "How you doing today?" And that's what I got. And I was, "Good to see you. You can blow the whistles. You know how to do it. I can't believe it. You guys are really intelligent." And I'd hear all kinds of noise in the kudzu. I guess they were probably laughing at me, thinking I was the idiot, but it was amazing. If it hadn't been for those, I would have never gotten over my first encounter. And I became so close to that family. And I actually camped out there next to my tree in my sleeping bag all night by myself. And they weren't very far from me. They were close to me camping out too. And every once in a while, they would make noises in the night to make sure I could hear them. They'd make different noises, and I could hear them looking at me. I could hear them walking up. They were looking over that kudzu to look at me. And I didn't ever carry my weapon again. I felt comfortable enough to know they weren't going to harm me. But they were a whole different type of creature than what I'd seen the first time. So they're the ones that make the X's. They had X's all over that area. Those big trees together and X's on the ground. They made me a milk carton. They had an old half-gallon milk carton they had found in the river, I guess. It was, at one time, it was red and white, the actual color on it, but it faded out to kind of pink and white because it'd been in the sun, probably in the river a long time, but it was still all together. And they had left that milk carton right at the gifting spot as a gift for me, and it had 2 sticks sticking through all 4 sides, and it all formed an X where it came out. It was very neat. I still got it. And
that's really cool.
It was amazing. It was their marker is the X. They are the actual real Forrest People. So I learned a lot from them, and they really trusted me. And I was really making a lot of ground with them. I kept going in, telling them my name. Every time I'd go in, "Good to see you today." Every time I'd leave, "Bye." They'd go, "Bye." You hear 4 or 5 of them, "Bye." It's crazy, I know, but it's what they did. And finally, it was probably 2.5, close to 3 years when one day I went in, I said, please tell me your name. My name is Darrell. What is your name? Darrell. Darrell is my name. And I was looking down. Actually, I brought them a box of donuts because they love jelly-filled donuts.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, their favorite food was cantaloupe, cooked bacon, which we all like, and
Yes.
they love jelly-filled donuts. That was their favorite foods. So I was reaching down in the box and I was putting it in a plate to put up in the platform box I made for them. And I said, please tell me your name. My name is Darrell. And the little one right there, I'm looking down. I'm not looking at her. And she goes, Aletha. I looked up and said, your name is what? Did you say that? And she didn't let me see her do it. And I'm like, did I really hear that? I was just freaked out. I couldn't believe what I heard. And I said, you have a name. Your name is Aletha. She goes, that's what I got. One word. Never a sentence. I got one word. So her name was Aletha.
That one word is more than I think most people get, though. So that's like an incredible experience to have had.
The younger one behind her, he never told me his name. She told me her name twice. Same thing, Aletha. And there was another time when she told me that. The bigger one behind, who by that time was probably closer to 8 foot, because this was toward the end. One day I said, can you tell me your name? I'd point at him. He said, Tobias. So all I ever got out of him over 3 years, I don't know, 3.5, maybe a little longer. And I asked him many times, where do you come from? Where do you come from? Do you know who Jesus is? I said, where do you come from? Up there? And they went. I said, does that mean heaven? Different galaxy? I don't know if they come from a different galaxy or heaven. I don't think they came from heaven. They came from somewhere else. So
I was going to say, if I make it to heaven, it's full of wood boogers.
Well, these weren't wood boogers. So, but I know what you're saying. Yeah, I don't think they meant that. But that, I've had people ask me over the years. No, I never had a call. I've heard other people say they talk to them all the time, but I never got out of those. I was completely ecstatic to get 2 words out of them. I got Aletha and I got Tobias. So I only got Tobias one time. I got Aletha twice, and that was over 3.5. That was over a 3.5 year period just to get that.
You've had physical communication with them though, with the pointing and the sound making, and
man, these creatures are these are an ancient people. You have to see them and to understand them. They're real. To really gain complete trust, I don't know about all of them. I don't, believe me, I'm no expert at anything. I'm only telling you what happened to me, and I've been very fortunate to experience this, and and I've seen many different ones since then. I've encountered another family in 2018. Me and Billy Howell, one of my old research partners that still goes there. And other ones, good and bad. I mean, not all my experiences have been good, but those on the river were completely different than any I've ever seen since. And they were really friendly, not aggressive. It's very difficult to build trust with these people. They're not. It's difficult to build trust with them. They first of all, this is me talking, not them. They don't trust people, because people try to kill them. and they have killed them. And then people, the worst thing about it is I never told but one person at that time, and I took my friend in there, Darrell, a really close friend of mine. I'd been telling him about him for a while. I said, man, you're not going to believe what I've run into on the river. I said, there's some creatures. They're like the Bigfoot. He said, man, are you kidding me? I said, no, I'm not. I said, do you think I would lie? He said, no, I don't think you'd lie. I know you're always been straight up with me. I said, do you want to go? I took him one time, and when he seen the first one, he took off running as fast as he could back to the truck, and he wouldn't come back. So he said, I don't want to be around them things. And I said, well, do me a favor. Don't tell nobody, because I don't want anybody to know where they're at. I don't want anybody to come in here and harm them, because they're not here to hurt anybody. They live on the river. And he never did, but he was scared to death of them. He never went back again. So, but they're pretty funny who you bring in there too. You probably learned that they want permission for you to do anything with them like that. You just don't bring somebody in and say, "Hey, look who's here." They didn't like it very much when I brought him in there. But it took me a while to get their confidence and faith in me again after I did that. And I never brought anybody else in there again. I'll tell you what I did do. I took, I think it was two different, you remember the old disposable Kodak cameras? I didn't have a phone, a cell phone back then, but the one that were made kind of like cardboard and had like 32 exposures in them.
Yeah, yeah.
I took one of those in there, and I wanted to take pictures of them. Well, they didn't like it. They didn't like it when I brought that out. Some reason, somehow, they knew what it was. And I told them, I said, can I make a picture of you? They didn't like it. But I made pictures for quite a while, just one or two occasionally. And I thought, well, I've got something big time here. I got a Bigfoot sitting 30 foot from me. Forest person and not Bigfoot. There's a difference, in my opinion. I had two cameras of those over about a year of 32 exposures. One of them was a green and white one. I can't remember the brand on it, and the other one was a gold and black Kodak one. And I took them to have them developed, and I was kind of excited because I just wanted to look at the pictures. I didn't make the pictures to show to everybody. I just wanted to look at them myself, and none of them came out. Every one of them was solid black, every exposure.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Now,
That's interesting.
I don't even know how that's possible, but it's true.
Like some kind of aura or something that prevented.
Well, I mean, I've had experiences since then that I've learned a lot, about them too. And these creatures have an ability to somehow, that's why you see so many blurry pictures in groups, because people who do get a picture, especially with the late model cameras, there's something about, they have a way that, from Ron Moorhead, my very close friend, besides my best friend Martin Groves and Martin Nunley, we've discussed this many times. Ron says, if you read his book called Quantum Bigfoot, it's amazing. I've read it 3 times. They transfer an energy which causes a vibration, which that's why a lot of your pictures, you see people that says, well, I don't see anything in that picture. It's pareidolia, but believe me, a lot of those pictures are not pareidolia. They're actually a picture, but it's the vibration. It's energy, a mass turning into energy, which, Einstein even talked about it was possible, and it does happen. We're all an energy, and they have a way of draining electronics. When we were in Cheatham County one time, we had orbs come in, which was really strange, and we had Bigfoot there too the week before, and they had drained all of our equipment that one night. My watch even stopped at 12:48. So they have some type of way of draining that energy and transforming it into a different state. I don't know how they do it, but
Seems a lot of paranormal
I don't know if all of them can do it or only certain ones can do it. I don't know. But I wish I could sit down and ask one of questions and I'd get a sentence like that. But I've never been able to do it. And I've been around quite a few of them in my lifetime. And matter of fact, just seen one 2 weeks ago. Some reason I find these things or they find me. I have no idea how it happens. But me and my daughter, she was 9 years old, and we're going down the road last August, and my daughter goes, "Dad, look." And we're out in the middle of the country in a real rural area, and she says, "Dad, look, there's a man chasing a deer." I looked over to the right, and there's this juvenile Bigfoot chasing a deer down the side of the road. And I said, "Take pictures." I gave her my phone, said, "Take a picture." And she got just a blur of it, and she got the deer. It was running full blast. So I don't know how many of these creatures I've seen. There's some reason I just see them. I don't know how I do. Martin Umley was with me. Actually, me, him, Ron Moorhead, and Martin Groves were camped in the woods in October, and we stayed in this cabin pretty remote. And I told him when we went in there, I said, "Man, I got a feeling about this place." He said, I said, "I'm telling you, there's Bigfoot all around this cabin." They said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I just feel it. They're here." And the very first night we was there, I thought Barton was going to have a heart attack because we had two Bigfoot behind the cabin breaking limbs and branches and looking at us. And Martin Groves was laying in the cabin, and two of them walked right by the window in front of him. He jumped up and come running out. He goes, "They're behind the cabin here." And it was crazy. They were all around us there at that cabin, and they stayed there till we left. Wow. And they were making noises. Matter of fact, Barton did an interview with me on his Inhumanoids, and right there at the campfire, me and him, and we were just laughing at all these Bigfoot making noises behind us, and you could hear huge limbs snapping. I said, "They're all around us." He goes, "I know." He says, "I can't believe it." But I don't know. I can't give you an idea, but some reason these things find me. I don't know how they do it. I don't know why they pick me. I'm sure other people too, but I'm very fortunate, I guess, or unfortunate at certain times. But
well, that's something that is very unique to you, and I mean, a lot of people, I imagine, especially in this field, are absolutely jealous of the fact that you're just a magnet to the activity.
you know,
And
Martin Groves is the same way with Dogman, as crazy as that sounds. So, you know, Martin's been my best friend for 42 years. And
we're hoping to get Martin on the show here pretty soon. I talked to him. I can't remember how long it's been, but I broke the ice with Martin, and I'm really hoping to get a good episode with him as well here in the near future.
Well, I can tell you, Martin too, and of course Ron. You know, ain't nobody in the world don't know Ron Moorhead, but you know they're Martin both. Martin is so busy. I mean, I'm just telling you the truth. He's got people calling him. He's the most famous Dogman person in the entire world by far. I mean, his first two books. You know, I'm fortunate I don't have the book here tonight because I'm staying at my different place tonight. But the whole second half of his second book is about me and him, and in our area of the LBL where we seen the massive Dogman back in October of 22. And, you know, me and him have had some great encounters, you know, crazy encounters. Me, him, and Barton both, all three of us together in certain areas. We had a Bigfoot one night watching us for over 3 hours behind a tree. And we sat next to the campfire. We've had a lot of encounters together. You know, I have a lot of trust and faith in them, and that's really the only ones that I go researching with anymore. And I will go with my buddy Billy Howell when I have time back home. He still goes to our spot in Tennessee, in Cheatham, Tennessee, Cheatham County, where we had all the encounters and the orbs down there. The same ones that attacked my house, or some of the ones out of there that attacked my farm. But you know, those guys are amazing. You know, can't say enough good things about them. You know, they're just true loyal friends, and you really got to trust each other and depend on each other where we go. We go out there to some places that most people won't go. But and the dog man's a whole different creature. I know I'm kind of jumping off subject here, but it's nothing like a Bigfoot. I've seen two, and both of them are completely different also. And these things are, my personal opinion, there may be some good ones of those. I think there's good and bad and everything, but I think those things are evil.
Yeah, that seems to be the kind of the resounding opinion with just about anybody who's encountered them. We talked to Matt Emsch, not too long ago about his encounter as well, and you don't really hear a lot of good stories, kind of similar to the Bigfoot family or the Forrest people that you were able to hang out with by the river. It's just nobody really has anything similar to that when it comes to Dogman. It's always very
well. You know, the one that Martin and I seen, and I think Josh Turner, his whole fourth chapter of his new book is about my experiences. But he and I were talking with Martin about the one we seen, and our documentary coming out this spring of Small Town Monsters. What a great bunch of guys. Seth Breedlove, Eli, Alexander, Heather, best people I ever worked with. Just super. We took them back to where we seen the massive Dogman in 2022. That thing could have killed us, but it didn't. And I was between 5 and 7 foot from it, and it was looking right at me, right in my eyes.
Oh,
and
wow!
It happened so quick. It was hard to get scared, but you know, I never seen anything like that. I hope I don't ever see. Well, I ain't gonna say I don't. I'd like to see it again because I want to figure this thing out. But I never seen anything like that though. It was like nothing from this world. It was different than the first Dogman I'd seen. The first one I seen seemed to be flesh and blood. This one I'm not sure, but it had a head about half the size of Martin's truck windshield, and it was staring right at me. It came from kind of a blue mist. It was laying in a ditch, a creek bed, looking right at me, and it went from a blue to a gray. It was gray when it stood up, and had a big mane around its neck like a line, and the eyes were real deep, clear, bright, deep, looked like real deep flashlights, and had kind of a grin on its face as it was looking at me. I thought sure this thing was just going to jump right on top of me. And I turned to Martin, and before I could say, "Are you looking at this thing?" He goes, "I see it, Bob. I see it." And this thing went from it was incredible. It got up out of that creek bed and it went right behind us. It turned to the right and it went across a field to our left. And it was huge. It was probably 8 foot long and tall. I don't know how tall it was. It wasn't 8 foot tall, but it was tall. And when it went through the field, you could see the whole creature. It was a gray silver color with like little lights on the end of each piece of fur. I don't know how to explain it, but you could see through it. It was like a cartoon almost. And then it walked through that field and it went up this hillside, this bank, real steep bank, and you could hear it breaking trees and limbs and everything going up that bank. And strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I just can't. I mean, it was hard to believe what I'd seen, but we seen it. We both did, and of course, Martin got zapped, and I did too. The same time this thing came out, and I've been what they call infrasound zapped. I've been 3 times,
Yeah.
twice by Bigfoot and once by Dogman, and it was that time it hit me, and it was in my upper chest. My legs were tingling, and I had a headache. Martin was completely different. He was so sick he couldn't even hardly talk, and his throat swelled together, and his tongue swelled up, and he keeps slapping me on the arm. He goes, "I can't breathe, bub. I can't breathe." And I said, "Man, let's get out of here." And I was worried he was going to not be able to breathe. He was gasping for air, and it was, and that lasted a good while till we got out of there in his truck and went on down to a lighted area a long distance from there, and got out. And I was trying to get him to go to the hospital because I thought he was having a heart attack, but he was sick for over a week from that. Now, I was okay the next day. All my signs were gone, but apparently it got him worse than it did me. And mine lasted probably 4 or 5 hours completely before it was gone. But his lasted nearly a week. And he was home.
And that kind of that adds to the strangeness of it all too, that everybody's kind of affected differently. And everyone who talks about having been zapped like that, almost it's like a same but different kind of situation where everybody kind of has described it in that same regard. That I've heard some people have said similar things to yours, and then I've also heard that people have been like just drop dead sick for days upon days.
Yeah, that's pretty much weird. That's pretty much the way Martin was. And actually, Ron and Barton and Martin and myself, we had a really good sit down talk about this. What do we think this is? That I think it's a radiation, some type of radiation, but I don't think it's an infrasound. But when you hear about an infrasound like a whale makes or something, it's kind of like a shock wave type thing. It kind of circulates by. It doesn't have that effect on you. It's almost like some type of radiation. And I truly believe that it is some type of radiation. And, when I talked to Scott Carpenter, such a great guy, I miss that guy, super guy. What a world of knowledge we lost with that guy. But, he helped me out on my farm in 2020 when I had these rogue Bigfoot terrorizing my farm. And, Scott had been he'd been zapped quite a few times, and they also attacked his house, and they brought friends with them when they attacked his house. It wasn't just Bigfoot, it was other things. So I still today, I don't know this, but I still have a hard time believing, how Scott passed like he did. But I'm not sure that all the things he had happen to him didn't have some type of effect on his arteries or something to cause what happened to him for him to pass. But, he was a great researcher, but and just an even better person, just a great person, good human being. I thought the world of him, and we're all going to miss him forever. But, there's so much out there people understand. I'm no expert at nothing but believing in Jesus and paying bills. That's about the only thing I'm an expert at. But I only know from what I've been through and what I've seen. And I've been very fortunate to have super good friends like my friends, Martin, and Ron. And we discuss these things a whole lot, even on the phone sometimes, talk about them for hours. But even Joe and Jesse, my close friends, Joe and Jesse Doyle, Hellbent Holler, they actually take a Geiger counter with them now. They found actual radiation in tracks. In the actual track these creatures make, they found radiation, I believe, with their Geiger counter in it.
Wow.
So I'm not sure what it is, but it has some type of radiation type effect. And that's what worries me, because radiation is very dangerous and it can have a lot of effects on your body for long term.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost instantaneous too.
Yeah.
But
cases.
Um, Unfortunately, Daryl, we are running out of time here.
We probably
I
don't
we
want
just
overtime. I've talked too long. I apologize.
no, nothing to apologize for. This is why we do this. I love sitting here and just hearing these experiences and learning from all of our guests and stuff. But um, I always like to end the show with, giving our guests an opportunity to promote anything. I know you have your Facebook group that we're all part of, and you had mentioned being in a documentary that will be coming out soon. So if you
Mhm.
have anything that you want to, get out to the public, the floor
Yeah,
is
I really
it's
appreciate
yours.
that. Thank you for letting me do that. I would like everybody to subscribe to your channel, and I appreciate you being in my group and being supportive and
Thank
having
you.
me on. And please subscribe to Barton Unley's Inhumanoids. He's on Wednesday nights, and he's one of my best friends I've ever had. And of course, Martin Groves has got his third book coming out pretty soon, and he and I spend more time together than my family when I'm home, and just one of the best friends I ever had in my life. Still is, and always will be. And he and I will do have the Small Town Monsters documentary coming out in the spring, and with Joe and Jesse of Hellbent Holler, and also Ron Moorhead. If you would, Ron's just super guy, just knowledgeable, and I can't say enough good about him either. And if you're interested in learning, read the Quantum. He has a book called Quantum, and it will break down what these creatures do, and it's spot on in my opinion on how they transfer these energies. I don't know if all these things can cloak. I've never seen one cloak myself. I have seen them go behind a tree and not come out. I don't know where they went, but they just vanished. Um, Dr. Matthew Johnson, I didn't believe in that guy for a long time, but I do now. I had experiences he had before I'd ever heard of him. So he's very knowledgeable. But there's a lot of people out there that are knowledgeable. But, subscribe to Hellbent Holler, subscribe to Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures, join our group. We'd certainly like to have you. And say hello to my lady out there. If I could, Yvette Wilburn, and I appreciate it. Y'all let me come on. I'm honored to be here, and thanks for letting me give the spiel for everybody.
Absolutely. Luckily to have you on here. Great conversation.
Well, thank you again. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Everybody, go check out all of those books, shows, and authors and creators. And we're going to go ahead and hit our outro video here for our YouTube watchers to enjoy. And we will be back again with another Bigfoot episode following this one as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that, everybody.
Good night.
And thanks for squatching.